So, welcome to our next edition. I never know whether to call it an edition or a version or
episode.
Episode.
That sounds
our
good.
next episode of the Book Scoop. I'm Priscilla, and I'm here with
Marcia and Sarah.
And we've got some books that just came out in March that we want to talk about. I guess I'll go first. I'm on a nonfiction kick still, and I'm also not purposely on a very sad book kick. And so the first book I'm going to talk about is In Love, a memoir of loss and love by Amy Bloom. Amy Bloom, people probably recognize the name, is an award-winning and best-selling author. This is her memoir about her husband getting early onset Alzheimer's, and he chose to have assisted suicide rather than have a very long diminishment of himself. He says several times in the book, as she relates, he wanted to die as himself and not as no longer himself. It starts with them actually arriving in Switzerland to have him end his life, but then it goes back and tells you the process of coming up to that point. It is, I think, the textbook definition of a bittersweet book. There is the sweetness of their love for each other, but also the reality of how horrible Alzheimer's is, and watching it happen to someone you love. And I think something I didn't really think about, and my mother died of Alzheimer's, I've seen this, but at first, when he first has symptoms and his personality is changing and they don't know what it is, it just feels like their marriage is falling apart. Right. And it takes years to understand what's going on. And it's just heartbreaking to think of that. A very difficult book to read, but a very important one. So I also have another nonfiction book I just want to mention. This is The How, Notes on the Great Work of Meeting Yourself by Ursa Daly Ward. I'm a big self-help book fan because I'm always thinking I will finally read the book that will give me total enlightenment in 5 minutes. Haven't found it yet.
Keep going.
But Ursa Daly Ward is a poet, and this book is a very interesting mix of poetry, lyrical language in the way that poems like shake us and make us see the world differently, and mindfulness and trying to live a meaningful life. And something definitely to read in small doses. It requires a lot of thought, but if you're looking for something a little different to give you a different outlook on life, The How, Notes on a Great Work of Meeting Yourself, is a really interesting new book to read.
Well, I will talk about The Wanders by Elena Medel, I think you pronounce it. It's translated from Spanish, and it is a book like I have not read in a long time. She is a poet, and this is definitely a novel. There's no poetry in it, but she has a wonderful way of using words and making phrases, and this book to me was a page turner, but not because it was so exciting or that I needed to know how it ended, but because the two people that she describes in here, two women, Maria and Alicia, I just wanted to get to know them better. And they are related. Maria is Alicia's granddaughter, but she has never seen her granddaughter because Maria got estranged from her family when she had Alicia's mom. She was very young, and she went from a poor region of Spain to Madrid to earn money and then have enough money to raise her own child. But that never happened. She never had the job that her mom and dad thought, oh, this is good enough for you to raise your own child. So they kept Maria's child all their lives. And in a way, it's a very tragic story. It starts in 1969, which is the end of the Spanish Civil War. Then you get the Franco dictatorship, and then the democracy. But what is very pertinent in Alicia's and Maria's story is the feminist movement and how that develops in Spain. Yeah, it's a very, very nice read. I think this is not just a novel. I think this is literature. A very, very good book to read.
I love books like that are like lyrical in the language, even though it's written as prose, you know. And of course, that's what I love about fiction, is meeting characters that you just want to know better, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And
Feel like-
then,
They feel like they could be part of your family.
They feel like they could
Yeah.
be part of your family.
Yes.
Yeah.
because they are so normal.
Right.
Yes,
They
right.
don't have extraordinary talents. They don't
Or extraordinary flaws.
Right.
extraordinary flaws. They are very normal people. But by the way it's written, they become very special. It's-
Mhm.
yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I also read this book, Every Little Kindness. And everybody can read this book. Everybody can read it.
Right.
It's by Marta Bartolj. Everybody can read this book because there are no words in it.
Oh.
Marta Bartolj is an artist, and she made a book without words. And for kids who don't like to read or who cannot read yet, they can know the story just by looking at the pictures. She does a very nice job of keeping the pictures almost black and white. There is green and blue in there, but it's very faint hues of colors. And what's important is mostly in red. So when kids hone in on the red, they can, they can interpret what's happening. It's about a dog that's lost, and how the person, the girl, gets the dog back. But in that sequence, all kinds of little kindnesses that people do for one another lead to more kindnesses in the book. It's a very, very sweet book. And for adults, it's very nice to look at, the drawings.
Yes.
They're very detailed. I wouldn't say it's art, but they're very interesting to look at from a more artsy point of view. So, Every Little Kindness by Marta Bartolj.
And that's a great book. I remember looking through it when it came in. It's a great book to sit down with your child and say, what do you see in this picture, and then what happens, and what happens after that, and the child can tell the story by themselves.
Yes.
By looking at the picture. It's a great family activity. My book is called All My Rage, and it's by Sabaa Tahir. I was so excited to read this book because the high school book club had read one of her other books. She has a series called An Ember in the Ashes, and we read that first book. That was fantasy. Fantasy is not my favorite. This is contemporary. I like contemporary. This book, though, does have a warning. It's an excellent book. It's a fantastic book, but she has a warning on one of the first pages that it does contain triggering events, and if that might be a concern to you, to turn the page, and she lists the different triggering events that are in this book. So there's a lot. It's not a happy book. My goal next month is to read a happy, fun book to tell you about. But it's an amazing book. We have two different timelines. We have Misbah, who is the mother of one of the characters, and we have her story, which is told as before, or then. And we have the story of Nur and Salahuddin, which is the now story. Misbah is given, well, is in an arranged marriage, and we hear that whole story and how she and her husband come to the United States. Sal and Nur have been friends since she came to the United States when she was 5 or 6. There was a tragic accident in her hometown, and her uncle came and rescued her and brought her back to the United States. I'm not giving anything away to say her uncle is a horrible human being, and she has lived with him for most of her life. He doesn't want anything to do with her or their culture, and they're from Pakistan. And so Sal's mom, who is also from Pakistan, kind of brings her into their family, and she secretly feeds her food that she would be familiar with and teaches her the language which her uncle doesn't want her to know anything about. And so she and Sal grow up together. They're best of friends, and of course, as you might imagine in a young adult novel, they like each other. But Sal has some things going on too, and like touch and people being close to him, he is not okay with. And it's not exactly clear why, but we do get an answer eventually. But then she tells him that she likes him, and that's the end of that. They're not friends anymore. And so this picks up like 6 months to a year after that happens. And we get to follow both of them and their stories and his mom's story. His mom is very, very ill. His dad is an alcoholic, and they have a hotel that they're trying to run. And so Sal has to make some significant choices where none of them are a good option. And so it's about loss, and it's about redemption, and it's about finding yourself and the people who are going to pull for you and are in your corner. It's awful and fantastic all at the same time.
I wish more people would read young adult stuff.
Oh my gosh, I'd much prefer to read young adult than adult stuff most of the time. Because as an adult, you can still relate to it. You can relate as the parent, you can relate as how you remember being a youth, you can relate as so many other ways. It's relevant. Yeah. It's very relevant.
I think it's interesting to call when we call it a coming of age story, as if you come of age once and then right? But it's like the process
over
of
and over and
is
over again.
over
Yes,
and over
yes,
and over
yeah,
again.
yeah. You come of age as a child, and then you come of age as a young adult, and you come of age as a parent, and you come of age as all of those things.
All of those things.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like we have some great books here for people to read, and we have more that just came in this month too. So we hope you'll stop by and get a good book to read at the library, and we'll see you next month with some of the latest stuff coming out. Thanks.